The lights in the lab were cold and bright. Vale stood in the center of a clear glass chamber, her body still, her silver eyes staring forward without blinking. She was beautiful, tall, and smooth-skinned, with soft violet markings on her arms. And back, her hair was white like snow and fell straight down to her waist. But inside, she felt nothing. She was a Zarelian female, born from a gene pool, not from a womb. Her creators didn't give her a name, just a number, but the human. Diplomats insisted that every alien sent to Earth must have a name. So they called her Vale, a soft word that meant life in ancient Zarelian. But to the scientists who built her, Vale had one purpose only: to breed. She was the perfect model, clean, silent, obedient, and highly fertile. Emotions were seen as dangerous for her kind. Feelings would slow down the process, make things messy. They were told mating must be fast, efficient, and controlled. But Vale didn't understand what feeling even meant. She had never laughed, cried, or hugged anyone. She had never been kissed or even truly touched, except by gloved hands for medical checks. Now, for the first time in her short life, she was being sent away not to breed, but to live on Earth with a human subject. 80 Vale. You will now board the shuttle, a mechanical voice said through the speaker. Vale blinked once, picked up the white bag handed to her, and stepped into the corridor around her. Other Zarelian females stood in lines, ready for shipment. They looked just like her, perfect, motionless, empty. But something strange stirred in Vale's chest. She did not know the word for it, but it felt like a soft buzz, something small and fluttering. Not pain, not fear, something else. The shuttle was warm, different from the cold of her lab chamber. A human male was waiting inside. His name was Draven Cade, an Earth diplomat and scientist. His hair was messy, his eyes kind but tired. He stood up when he saw her and smiled. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice calm. "I'm Draven." Vale tilted her head, confused. No one had ever greeted her with warmth before. She was used to commands, not kindness. "I am Subject 87 Vale," she said softly. Eyes down, Draven frowned. "No, just..." "Vale is fine," he replied. "You're not a subject here." The ship lifted into the stars. Earth grew larger in the window. Vale sat across from Draven, her hands folded in her lap. He offered her a small cup of warm liquid chamomile tea, he said. "It's relaxing." Vale looked at the cup. Unsure, she took a sip. Her eyes widened slightly. The taste was soft, floral, strange, but not bad. "This is unnecessary," she said. Draven chuckled. "Sometimes unnecessary things are the best." Vale stared at him longer than she meant to. Her programming reminded her, focus on reproduction, not distractions. But she said nothing when they arrived. On Earth, Draven took her to a small house near the research base. It was quiet, filled with soft lights, clean air, and strange smells. Flowers, books, warm bread. "This will be your room," he said, showing her a cozy space with a soft bed. "And blankets? There is no mating chamber?" Vale asked, confused. Draven blinked, then slowly shook his head. "No, Vale, you're not here to mate." She looked even more confused. "Then why am I here?" He took a deep breath, sat on a chair, and said, "Because the Council wants to learn if connection, real connection, can grow between two different species. Not just biology, but trust, understanding, even emotion." Vale stared at him. "I do not have emotions," she said plainly. "That's okay," he replied. "Maybe you will, maybe not. I'm not going to force anything." His voice was gentle, his body language calm. Vale had expected to be used, to be ordered, but instead, he offered her freedom she did not know what to do with. That night, she sat alone in her room, staring at the walls. She remembered the cup of tea, the way his eyes had looked at her not as an object, but as something real, something alive. She touched her chest, felt the soft skin. Then she whispered, "What is this feeling?" For the first time in her life, she wanted to know, not just obey. She did not know that this was the beginning of her transformation from a breeding tool to someone who might one day feel love, and deep inside her, where no scanner could reach. The fluttering returned stronger this time. She stood in the kitchen, waiting for him to give the order. But instead, he quietly asked, "Do you take sugar in your tea?" Vale didn't understand the question. She had read about sugar in Earth's data files, a sweet substance used in food and drinks, but no one had ever asked her what she preferred. She had never been given a choice. "Before I do not know," she said honestly. Draven smiled gently, his voice calm. "Then try both ways. You'll find out what you like." He handed her the warm cup. Vale looked down at the golden brown liquid. Her hands trembled, just a little. Not from fear but from something else, something new. She took a sip. It was warm. It was strange. It was nice. The house was quiet. Only the soft hum of machines and the occasional bird sound outside filled the silence. Draven moved around casually, giving Vale space. Not watching her like a scientist, not touching her like an owner. Vale followed him into the living room, still holding the tea in both hands. She looked at the couch, then at him, waiting. "You can sit," he said, with a kind nod. She slowly lowered herself onto the couch, sitting stiff and upright, like she had been trained. In the lab, he sat across from her in an old chair, resting one ankle on his knee, relaxed. "So, have you seen Earth movies before?" he asked. Vale blinked. "No, we were not allowed," he chuckled. "Then I'm going to show you one, something light, something with feeling." The screen lit up with colors, sounds, and moving people. The movie was about two humans falling in love, slowly, gently, with awkward moments and sweet touches. Vale watched silently, her head tilted to the side, studying every detail, the way their fingers touched, the way they looked into each other's eyes before a kiss, halfway through the film. She turned to Draven. "Why do they do that?" she asked. "What?" he replied. "The kiss." "Yes. What is its purpose? Is it part of the mating process?" Draven smiled softly. "Not exactly. It's more emotional. A kiss is something you give when you feel close to someone. It can mean love, comfort, desire, even safety." Vale's silver eyes blinked slowly. "We do not have that. We were taught only the steps of coupling, timing, position, fertility." Draven didn't respond right away. He looked at her with quiet sadness. "That's not your fault. You were made that way. But you're here now, and no one will force anything on you." She stared at him for a long moment, unsure what she was feeling. It was not fear, not pain maybe. Peace. Later that evening, Vale explored her room more. She opened the small closet and found soft clothes. Not the tight-skinned suits from the labs, but loose, warm shirts and pants. She put on one of Draven's oversized t-shirts. It smelled like wood and spice. She sat on the bed, her fingers tracing the blanket. Everything was soft here. She didn't feel like a tool anymore. She thought about the woman in the movie, the way she smiled when the man brushed her hair. Could that be real? Was that pleasure? The next morning, she stood in the kitchen again. Draven walked in, rubbing his eyes, clearly not expecting her to be awake so early. "You're up," he said, smiling. "Sleep okay?" Vale nodded. "The bed is comfortable," he raised an eyebrow. "That's good. You know, you don't have to stand like that. Relax." "I don't know how." She admitted, quietly. Draven paused, then went to the cabinet and pulled out the tea leaves again. "Let's start the day with something simple," he said. "Tea?" She nodded. "Yes. And this time, I would like to try it with sugar." His grin widened. "Now we're getting somewhere." That day, they didn't talk about breeding. They talked about food, about music, about weather. Draven explained. Why humans like dancing in the rain and singing in the shower. Vale listened closely, asking questions like a curious child. When a wind chime on the porch rang softly, she turned her head sharply. What was that? Just the wind moving metal pieces, Draven said. Beautiful, right? She walked to the window and stared. It is. Pleasant that night, Vale sat on the couch again, a blanket around her shoulders. She looked at Draven and said, I thought mating was everything. It was all we were told to do. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. There's more to life than function. Vale, there's joy, laughter, closeness, none of it forced. It has to be chosen. She lowered her eyes, whispering, I don't know how to choose. I was never allowed. Draven's voice softened. Then maybe now is your time to learn. No pressure, just little steps. Vale nodded slowly, her eyes not cold anymore, but soft, wondering. Her fingers brushed the edge of her cup, and she whispered, This tea. It tastes better today. Draven smiled, because you chose it, and outside, the wind sang through the chimes again. She sat across from him, fingers on her lap, and waited for him to say it now. She thought, now he will tell me to serve, but instead, Draven leaned back, sipped his tea, and smiled gently. Would you like to go outside today, Vale? Blinked slowly, the question floating in her mind like smoke. Would I like? She had no answer. Not because she didn't want to, because she had never been asked. Not once in her life had anyone asked what she wanted. Her whole life had been about what others needed from her body, her genes, her silence, and now a human was sitting in front of her, asking for her choice. Outside, the wind was cool and the sun was gentle. Vale walked carefully beside Draven, her steps slow but steady. Her skin tingled under the open sky. She had never felt natural light on her body before, not without lab. Glass in between, they reached a small garden behind the house, full of strange green plants and colorful flowers. Draven pointed to a wooden bench under a tree. Have a seat, he said, brushing off some leaves. Vale sat down slowly, eyes scanning. The garden? Why are these grown? They serve no survival purpose. Draven chuckled. They serve the heart, not the stomach. The heart. She repeated softly. He nodded. Yes, sometimes beauty is reason enough. Vale stared at a purple flower near her feet. Her fingers moved without thinking, touching its soft petals. It was delicate and simple, but something about it made her chest feel tight, almost warm. Later, back inside, she stood by the window and asked, Draven, when a human feels close to someone, how do they know it is real? He looked up from the tablet in his hands. It depends, I guess. Sometimes it's in the way you talk, or how safe you feel around them. Sometimes it's in small things, like remembering how they take their tea. Vale turned toward him, her silver eyes calm lie. Like one spoon of sugar now. He smiled. I know. A pause filled the air. Not uncomfortable, just quiet, like a soft blanket. That evening, Draven gave her something. A small box wrapped in blue paper. It's a gift, he said. She opened it carefully. Inside was a simple necklace with a silver pendant shaped like a tiny leaf. I don't understand, she said. What is the purpose of this object? It's not about purpose, he replied. It's about meaning. I saw it at the market and thought it looked like you elegant. But strong Vale stared at the necklace, unsure how to respond. Her throat tightened again. Not from fear, but from something. Tender, do I have to give something back? She asked. No, he said gently. You don't owe me anything, Vale. That word echoed in her mind. You don't owe me anything. No one had ever told her that before. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her fingers touched the necklace resting on her collarbone. It wasn't just metal now, it was a moment, a memory, a question no one had asked her before. "What do you want, Vale?" She whispered to the empty room. "I don't know, but I want to find out." The next day, she saw something strange. A young human couple walking hand in hand through the nearby field. Laughing, the female leaned her head on the male's shoulder. And they smiled at each other like there was nothing else in the universe. Vale tilted her head, confused but fascinated. There was no urgency in their touch, no command, no biological purpose, just comfort. She watched as they kissed, a soft, slow kiss, not for breeding but for something deeper, and in that moment her chest ached not from pain, but from longing, not for mating, but for connection. That evening, she sat beside Draven on the couch, not across from him, but close. Their shoulders nearly touched. He looked at her, but didn't say anything. Vale turned slightly. The couple in the field. Were they mating? He laughed softly. No, they were just sharing something. Something private and emotional. You could call it love. She repeated the word slowly. Love. She looked down at her own hands, then at his. Draven, she said quietly. If I asked to hold your hand, would that be allowed? He nodded slowly, offering his palm without pressure. If you want to, she reached out, her fingers sliding into his. The touch was warm, strong, real. A shock moved through her, not pain, not program error, but something that made her eyes sting with strange heat. She didn't know it yet. But that was the first time she ever felt alive. The sky opened with rain, and the human couple didn't run. They stayed, arms wrapped around each other, kissing under the storm. Vale stood under the shelter of a tree, watching them, and something inside her broke. It wasn't pain, not fear, not even confusion. It was a quiet ache, a slow warmth rising in her chest, crawling up her throat. And then, for the first time in her life, a single tear slipped from her silver eye. Earlier that morning, Draven had told her, "There's a park nearby. It's peaceful. And earth rain is something special, cleansing." Vale had never felt rain before on Zyrel Prime. Weather was controlled, managed by machines. The skies never cried there. But here, nature did as it pleased, and somehow, it felt more honest. Draven handed her a soft gray coat and a small umbrella, just in case, he said with a smile, but sometimes, it's better without it. The park was quiet at first. Only a few humans walking their pets or sitting. On benches, Vale wandered slowly, touching the leaves, listening to birds, breathing the real air not recycled from lab vents. Then clouds gathered above, thick and heavy, and soon rain began to fall. Most humans opened umbrellas or ran for cover, but not the couple she saw by the fountain. They stood close, faces wet, foreheads touching, eyes closed, and then they kissed. Vale froze. This wasn't like the mating procedures in her training files. This was slow, tender, beautiful. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. She clutched the edge of her coat and whispered, "What is this feeling?" Her heart beat faster, not in panic, but in wonder. Her eyes stung, and for a moment she thought it was the rain, but no, she was crying when she returned to the house, soaked and silent. Draven looked up from the kitchen and frowned. "Vale, you okay?" he asked, walking over quickly with a towel. She didn't speak, didn't meet his eyes. He dried her hair gently, but she stood still like a statue. He noticed her hands were shaking. "Did something happen?" he asked, voice soft. She looked up, her eyes full of tears now, not just one. They kissed. And they smiled. Draven nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. Was it confusing? He asked. "No," she said. "It was beautiful." And it hurt. He guided her to the couch and sat beside her, giving her space. "Sometimes beauty can hurt," he said. "Especially when we've never known it before." Vale placed her hand on her chest. It was never like that in the lab. Never. Soft, never chosen. Draven's voice dropped to a whisper. That's because what they taught you wasn't love. It was control. Later that night, Draven brought her a small book of Earth poems. He said they were old, some written hundreds of years ago. Vale opened it with care, turning each page like it was sacred. She read one aloud, slowly, her voice trembling. I do not love you as if you were Saltros or Topaz, but I love you as certain dark things are loved, secretly. Between the shadow and the soul. She stopped, the words hitting her like a wave. Her eyes widened, and she whispered, do humans really feel like this? Deep inside. Draven nodded. Yes, sometimes we don't even understand it ourselves, but we feel it anyway. Vale closed the book, placed it on her lap, and said softly, I want to feel that. I want to know if I can. In the following days, Vale changed. She smiled, more small. Unsure smiles, but real. She started noticing things she never did before. The warmth of tea, the softness of a blanket, the joy in a child's laugh across the fence. One evening, she asked Draven, can I paint something? Of course, he said. Have you painted before? She shook her head. No, but I see colors inside now, and I want to let them out. He bought her brushes and canvas the next day, and she spent hours blending shapes and shadows. Her first painting was of a woman standing in the Rhine-a-Land, but reaching toward the light. Draven stared at it and whispered, she's beautiful. Vale didn't say it aloud, but deep down, she hoped he saw her in the painting. One night, as they sat by the window, Vale turned to him and asked, why haven't you touched me? Draven looked surprised, then thoughtful. Because I don't want to touch you unless you want me to. Not because you were made for it, because you choose it. Vale's voice was barely a whisper. No one ever waited for my choice before. He gently reached out, offering his hand, not grabbing, just offering. She looked at it for a long moment, then placed her fingers in his, and in that silence, as rain once again began to fall outside, Vale finally smiled. She stood at the doorway, her robe slipping from her shoulders, and whispered, you may use me now. ... But Draven didn't move. His eyes widened, not with hunger, but with sorrow. He stepped back slowly and said, no, Vale, not like this. The evening had started quiet, just like the others. Vale had prepared the tea herself, 2 cups, one for him, one for her. She sat across from Draven, watching him read, her fingers lightly gripping the silver pendant he had gifted her days ago. Her thoughts were louder than ever before. Why hadn't he claimed her? Why hadn't he done what males were meant to do? In the Zarelian breeding houses, males never waited. There was no talking, no asking. The moment a female was available, especially one with perfect genetics, she was taken. Used, clean, efficient, but Draven had touched her hand gently. Not her body. He had smiled at her paintings, not her curves. He had given her kindness, but not hunger. Vale's programming told her that the time had come, that she had to fulfill her purpose now, and deep down, part of her wanted to know what it would feel like when she was the one who chose. So she walked into his room. Draven looked up from his desk, surprised. Vale? She stepped closer, slowly, her robe falling slightly from one shoulder, revealing the glowing violet patterns on her skin. Her voice was calm, steady, but unsure inside. I offer myself to you. Fully. Silence. Draven stood slowly, setting down the tablet. Why are you doing this, Vale? It is time, she replied. I've felt the connection. The council expects results, and I think I want this, but her voice shook on the last word. Want, it still felt strange on her tongue. Wanting was new, frightening. Draven stepped toward her, then stopped. He reached down and gently picked up her robe, placing it back on her shoulder. I won't take you, Vale, he said softly. Not like this. Not when you're still unsure. She looked at him, confused, but I am sure. I came to you willingly, maybe, he replied, but your eyes. They're asking questions, not giving answers. Vale lowered her gaze, shame creeping in. I thought this is what I was meant to do. I thought this is what you wanted. Draven sat down on the bed's edge and looked at her gently. I want you, Vale, but not your body alone. I want your smile, your mind, your voice. I want your truth. She stepped back, shaking. No one ever cared about that before, she whispered. I was made for breeding, not thinking, not feeling, not. Choosing Draven stood again and touched her hand not to pull. But to steady, you can be more than what they made you for. You are more. Tears burned her eyes again. But she didn't wipe them away this time. She let them fall. Let them exist. Because maybe just, maybe those tears meant she was real. That night Vale didn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her room, robe wrapped tightly around her body, staring at the small candle Draven had lit earlier. The flame danced slowly free, alive, never still. She whispered to the air, I didn't want to be used. I wanted to be wanted. The difference hit her like lightning all her life. She had been told what she must give, but no one had ever asked what she longed for. In the morning, she made breakfast on her own. She wasn't a servant, she wasn't. A mate, she was. Learning, when Draven walked in, he paused at the sight, you cooked. She nodded, not looking up. Yes, I wanted to try. He took a bite, smiled. It's good. A little salty, she gave a tiny smirk. Like me, Draven laughed. And for the first time, Vale felt something warm bloom inside her, not duty. Not expectation, just joy. Later that day, they walked along the ridge behind the house, the sky wide and blue. Draven stopped and pointed at the horizon. Out there, he said, are hundreds of alien species, and each has their own way of living, but only one thing matters in the end, choice. Vale stood beside him, the wind blowing through her white hair. I think. I understand now, she said. Breeding is survival, but connection is life. He looked at her with pride in his eyes. Exactly. She turned toward him, eyes shining. Next time, when I offer myself, it will be from me, not from. Programming. Draven's smile was gentle but powerful. I'll wait, Vale, as long as it takes. And that evening, she painted again. This time, it was two hands almost touching. A soft glow between them, not flesh meeting flesh, but something deeper, something sacred. She screamed without sound, her hands pressed to her temples. The code inside her mind activated again. It whispered commands, cold and cruel. Obey, submit, breed, but her heart said something else. Feel, choose, love, and for the first time, she disobeyed her creators. It started with a strange signal, a walking near the outer sensors behind the house. Vale felt a sharp pulse in her head. Her vision flickered, and her knees trembled. A silent order had been sent from Zyrel Prime. Recall signal back in the lab. She had been programmed with emergency override systems if a subject began to think for herself. The network would call her back, force her to return, erase her memories, reset her core behaviors. The scientist never imagined a female might resist it, but Vale was no longer the subject they had created. She collapsed in the grass. Trembling, Draven ran to her side, kneeling beside her. Vale. What's happening? Her eyes were wide with fear, something he'd never seen in her before. There. Calling me, she whispered, from the hive system. They know I'm changing. Draven's jaw tightened. Then we blocked the signal. She shook her head, voice weak. You don't understand. It's inside me. It's not just orders, it's pain. It's fear. He lifted her gently in his arms, carrying her inside the house. We'll find a way. I won't let them take you inside. He set her down and pulled out an old toolkit. He opened a diagnostic scanner and aimed it at the side of her neck. A tiny red dot pulsed their hidden implant, glowing with coded light. "It's a neural control tag," Draven muttered. "I should have known these bastards hardwired obedience into you." Vale's breathing was shallow, her fingers clenched. "It's stronger now. I can hear them. I can feel them watching me." Draven gritted his teeth. "We're going to destroy it, but I need your help. Can you fight it from inside, even?" For a moment, Vale looked up, tears in her eyes. "I'll try. For me, for you." He connected wires to the implant and ran counter-signals from his tablet. Meanwhile, Vale sat still, her eyes closed, inside her mind. She stood in a white room with no walls. Echoes of her creator's voices circled her. You were made for one. Purpose. Do not think, do not feel, obey, but through that storm. She remembered something else, the way Draven smiled when she said his name. The warmth of the teacup in her hands, the sound of the rain on the window as they sat in silence. And that soft word he had whispered to her when she cried for the first time, "You are real." She screamed inside her mind and reached for the walls, but the walls melted, turning into the sound of laughter and the color of sunlight. The cold commands shattered like glass underfoot, and then she opened her eyes. Draven looked up from the screen, breath held. The red glow on her neck had faded, replaced by a steady white pulse. "You did it," he whispered. "You took control." Vale's shoulders slumped in relief. "I was so afraid. But I chose to stay. I chose." He knelt beside her, gently holding her hand. "You're not a weapon anymore, Vale. You're free." Later that evening, she sat by the window, watching the stars come out. Her hair was loose, her robe soft. She had removed the control tag Draven had, cut it out and thrown it into the fire. It was gone now, forever. She spoke quietly. "I thought I would feel empty without the programming. But instead, I feel full." Draven smiled from across the room. "That's your soul stretching its wings." Vale turned to him, her eyes soft. "I disobeyed. Not because I hate what I was, but because I now know what I can be." Draven stepped closer, then stopped. She looked up at him and said, "This time, if I reach for you, it's not out of duty, it's because I want to." He nodded slowly. "And I'll only answer if your heart calls me, not your past." She stood, walked to him, and placed her palm on his chest, feeling his heartbeat, slow, steady, strong. She leaned forward, not rushed, not nervous, just calm, and her forehead touched his. Not a kiss, not yet, just closeness. Real and earned. In that moment, the stars above Earth seemed to shine a little brighter. She stood in the council chamber, eyes steady, voice calm. Once, she had been a tool. Something made in a lab to obey and be silent. Now, she spoke. Not as a subject, but as a woman, with her own voice. Her own choice and her own name. Vale. 1 week earlier, she had sat in Draven's garden. The sunlight soft on her face. She was barefoot in the grass, holding a paintbrush instead of a lab report. She was smiling not for someone else, but because her heart felt light. Freedom, she learned, wasn't just the absence of Chanzet, was the presence of peace. Draven sat beside her, watching her paint. "You've changed," he said quietly, "but not into something new. More like someone finally becoming." Vale tilted her head and smiled. "I think I always had the pieces. You just helped me fit them together." The Interplanetary Council had summoned her to speak. News of her resistance to Zorelian control had reached them. Many doubted her. Some called it a malfunction. Others feared what she had become. Draven offered to go with her, but she refused. "This I must do alone," she said. "Not because I must prove anything, but because I finally can." The chamber was massive, full of alien races with sharp eyes and long records. When Vale entered, Silence fell. She wore no lab collar, no mating mark. Just a simple dress and the silver pendant Draven had once given her. She stepped to the center and looked at them not with fear, but with truth in her gaze. "I am Vale," she said, voice steady. "I was created in a lab and told I had only one purpose to breed. But I have discovered something greater. I have felt joy, pain, beauty, and freedom." Some murmurs rose in the room, but she didn't stop. "I stand here not to fight my creators, but to ask a question. What is the value of life without choice? A body can reproduce, yes, but without a soul. What are we passing on?" She paused, then added, "I was called perfect because I was silent, but I say, now perfection is not silence, it is the courage to speak." The council remained quiet, stunned, for the first time in their long records. A Zarelian female had spoken not as a number, but as a name. When Vale returned to Earth, she didn't run into Draven's arms. She walked slowly, confidently, and when she reached him, she took his hands in hers and said, "I didn't do it to impress you. I did it to honor me." Draven looked at her. Pride in his eyes. "I know," he said, "and I've never admired you more." That night, under the stars, they sat by the fire, quiet and close. No one rushed, no words were needed. Her head rested on his shoulder, his hand over hers. Later, she whispered, "Draven, may I kiss you now?" He smiled. "Only if it's what you want," and it was. Their lips met not as a ritual, not as an act of biology, but as two hearts, saying, "I see you, I choose you." Her first real kiss wasn't filled with fire, was filled with light. Soft, slow, and sacred. Days passed, and Vale continued to grow. She began teaching other Zarelian females who had left their labs too. She showed them how to paint, how to ask questions, how to feel. One asked her once, "What was it like?" "Your first moment of freedom," Vale answered softly. "It was like hearing your own voice for the first time, and realizing it was beautiful one afternoon." She stood in front of her mirror, the same mirror that once reflected only skin, hair, and pattern. Now she saw herself. Not a tool, not a program, not a subject, but a woman, whole, alive, and worthy. She whispered to the mirror, "You are not what they made you. You are what you became," and for the first time ever, she smiled at her own reflection. Draven entered the room quietly, a flower in hand. "Vale," he asked, "you okay?" She turned toward him, tears in her eyes, but these were tears of joy. "I'm more than okay," she said, walking into his arms. "I'm finally me." That night, as the stars shone above Earth and the wind danced through the chimes, Vale and Draven stood together, not as man and subject, not as diplomat and test unit, but as two souls who had found one another, not because of what they were made for, but because of what they chose to become.